guys, it's Kelly Lativola here, and I am going to be doing a video today using Garden Buddies. I have the design team pack, so it doesn't have the black outline, so it's kind of hard to see the stamps I'm using because they're already on my block. But anyway, and I'm also going to be using the Sunshine Layers die. So I laid that down and then I traced around it so I knew where I needed to stamp at so that everything would fit when I die cut it. I'm going to use my T-square ruler just to kind of get the placement of my stamps. The way that these are laid out in the stamp set is this little girl with both of her hands open are standing next to a little girl with her hand open and a little boy with his hand open. And like they just want to be friends. Like they want to be friends and they want to hold hands. And I could not shake this idea out of my head. So I found my center and I am stamping the girl in the middle first. I'm using Intense Black ink by Simon Says Stamp because it is waterproof as well as Copic safe. So once I got her stamped, I went ahead and masked her, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the other little girl and little boy. There's a fourth boy in this set. He is sitting down. They're all just like totally adorable, and I just love them. Like with their little bib overalls, just so stinking cute. So anyway, by masking them, that's what's going to make it look like they're holding hands because one hand will be underneath the other one. So then I'll just go ahead and remove that mask and then make sure you erase your pencil lines because otherwise trying to erase them after you watercolor is difficult. I'm going to go ahead and use some liquid Miskit by Grumbacher to mask the area to keep those clean for Copic coloring. And I wanted a really, really vibrant background. When I was doing this, watercolors traditionally you layer, then layer, and layer, and layer until you get the intensity that you want. But let's be real, yo, I'm not a watercolor artist. I just want pretty backgrounds. So I just went straight to the refills. Like they all look like they're the same color, but I promise you that they're not. They're all Distress ink refills, and they react really nicely with water, and they're super vibrant. So that's why I am using them. And you can see I just have like one dot. It's going to be more than enough to get us through. I laid down a base of clean clear water and then started picking up a little bit of color. You can see it's running like crazy because I have all that wet and it's going to go wherever it's wet. So I just kind of scooped it back over to where I wanted it with a dry paper towel. And then I'll make sure that there's more moisture on my paintbrush when I pick up the next color because I kind of absorbed all of that. I know that you could go, you don't have to do wet on wet. You can go in with a dry brush. Well, not dry, moist. Damp. You can go in with a damp brush and kind of move it around that way. I don't like the way my colors blend when I don't do wet on wet. Maybe you'll have better luck with it. Just try it and figure out and see what works for you. But just know if you do wet on wet, it's going to run wherever it is in fact wet. So if you don't want your colors running all over the place, this is not the technique for you. Here I'm just kind of, I felt like the blue got a little bit washed out because it was the first color that I put down and it was running all over. So I was just putting some of that back in, and I'm going to go in with my last color, which is the yellow. It's super intense, and you can see that my board is flat. I know a lot of card makers will prop theirs up so that everything kind of runs to the bottom. I don't do that. I just leave mine flat and just kind of work with what's going on. So sometimes you get that extra bleeding like around the edges where there's most of the water, and you can see especially in the yellow where the darker colors are running into that. I'll fix it in a minute. In fact, I'll fix it right now. I'm just going to blot up some of it with a dry paper towel. There's still going to be some, but you can kind of blend it out with a wet paintbrush just like I'm doing here. And then what I was doing before and what I will continue to do is I'm kind of doing like little paint splotches or extending out the edges. And this is because I didn't want a brush. How do I describe this? I didn't want it to be a like perfect square, perfect circle. I wanted it to look just kind of like splattered on there. So that's what I'm doing with my paintbrush when you see me adding in these little splatters and elongating it here or adding in something there. It's just because I didn't want a I guess, a really formed edge. I wanted it to be a little bit more fluid. So from here, I decided to add in just like a smidge of water speckles just to like kind of push the color away from some areas. This just adds a little bit of interest. It certainly isn't something that you must have to do. It just makes the background a little bit more interesting. And then I'm going to go ahead and dry that down. When I do this, you'll be able to see that I got super dark edges on the blue and the yellow, which I did not like at all. And it was because that was where the majority of my water was. So I'm just going to take a wet paintbrush and don't have anything on it and just kind of move that color back around. Because distress inks react with water. This is something that, you know, it's not difficult to do. I can just use the color that's already on my paper. And I did feel like I lost a little bit of that pink. It felt like it got a little lost in there. So I'm going to go ahead and add some more of that back in just to like amp up the vibrancy of the pink. And then I'm going to dry the whole thing down again. I will warn you, because these are super pigmented, sometimes the color doesn't dry completely right away. So just be aware of that. You might want to like lay a clean paper towel on top of it and blot up what you can. The other thing that I do is before I remove the liquid frisket, I use a wet baby wipe, and I'm very careful to just touch the liquid frisket because you can reactivate those distress inks in the background, but I just kind of try to wipe them off. So when I'm pulling it off like this with my finger, I'm not spreading the color that might be on top of it all over my images. I don't want, you know, blue and yellow and all that good stuff on my images. I want them to be white so I can color them with Copics because it's pretty. So here, these are basically this is my lineup for skin tones. You know, pretty much that's what I do. I normally color as if my light source is in the top right. So the hair on that falls over his forehead would cast a shadow to the bottom left. Same thing with his hair over on the right hand side. That would, you know, be casting a shadow. The light would be to the side of that. And so I only put my darkest shading there where I feel like it would be the darkest. The left side of his face would be darker because the light would be on the right hand side. There is no like hard and fast rule. A lot of people just color as if they had central lighting. So they put their highlights in the middle. That's totally fine too. Most of the time when I'm coloring people, I'm not really paying attention to necessarily a light source. This time I was trying to be better about it because, you know, you're never going to get good at it if you don't practice it. So I wanted to try to see if I could maintain that, to pay attention to it. So I colored all of their skin tones exactly the same way. I'm only going to show you his, just because I feel like I'm just showing you the same thing over and over again. I wanted to add a little bit of pink to their cheeks. So I went in with an R20 and just drew little circles on their cheeks. And then I'm going to blend that back out with the E50, which was the lightest color from the combination of skin tone colors I used. Here, Dawn always tells me that I need to, well, not that I need to, but that I don't want to say gray, that a more, neutral, it's a more gray based color. Okay, that's just what it is. I don't know how else to say it. A cooler color. There we go. Now I sound like I know what I'm talking about. Not really. That's a lie. But a cooler color mixed with warms makes a image more interesting. So since she is on the yellow/orange side, I thought that a good contrast would be the E70s, which are very grayed out. They're not warm colors whatsoever. So that's how I decided to do her hair that way. And then later on, you'll see when I do his hair, I use warmer browns. So basically, I mean, her highlight would be around the band of her bangs because it like formed to her head. So there would be a natural highlight there. And then I left the top of her ponytail on the right hand side a little bit lighter for where the light would hit. I prefer to start with my lightest color and then work out to my darkest, and then from my darkest back into my lightest. But you do whatever works for you. There isn't a right or a wrong way to do this. It's all just preference. So here I'm going to make her blonde, and her part would be the darkest, and then the left hand side of her hair, like closer to where it's tucked behind her ear, it would also be dark. Anywhere something is gathered, that's where your darkness is going to be. So where her hair comes out from her part, and then also where it's tucked behind her ear. And I'm just using really light flicking motions. I When I do blonde hair, I have a tendency to add in that Y21 just to kind of brighten it up a little. Otherwise, I feel like it's like a super ashy blonde, which I have to tell you, in real life, I totally love. That's the color of my hair. And I get sad when I go to dye it and it turns gold on me. Uh, but like whatever blonde combination, and there's a bunch of them out there. I've even seen some people, for a while, platinum blonde was really like in style, and so they were even coloring like platinum blonde hair with Copics, which was super cool. Here, this is actually my favorite combination for browns. The E55s is where I'm happy, and it is a more golden brown. It has warmer hues. Here, this is exactly the way that I part my son's hair. I part his hair exactly the same way. So the way his hair would lay, the highlight would be more like on that little, I don't want to call them bangs because he's a boy, but they're kind of bangs. So facts are facts. The bangs, his highlight would be more on his bangs. The back of his hair would be darker with the light source coming from the right. The bangs that would be hanging out over his face would be the part that's catching the light, as well as on the left-hand side of his head, there would be more like a middle highlight. Here, I'm pulling out my hex chart because when I was masking with the liquid first kit, it wasn't perfect. It's never going to be perfect. I'm totally fine with it. The way that I fix that is not to go back in with my watercolors. I go back in with my Copics. I pull out my hex chart, I lay it down, I try to figure out what color is going to be closest to it, and then I fill it in with that. I will tell you that that first color was V15. I just didn't realize I wasn't on the camera. Sorry about that. So here, I'm just so you can see each color that I used. I mean, I'm doing the same exact thing. I'm just filling in those little spots. They all blend pretty well. I didn't really have too much trouble matching them up. If you find that you are having trouble, don't be afraid to mix colors, to what you have to get something that's going to cover that up and blend well. Here, I decided that because the background was so vibrant, I was going to color them all the same. So they were all going to be exactly matching little jean overalls. And so you can see me, I covered the whole thing with my lightest color, and then with my medium color, I'm going in and adding just little details. So I'm adding two little, almost like dashes from the side of her jeans, and then also from the middle where her pants meet. And the reason I'm doing this is because when you wear pants, they naturally, unless you're wearing skinny jeans, they naturally gather at the bottoms, and there would be some definition. This helps to give, more of, I guess, a realistic look. And so my darkest color, though, I'm only really adding it to where the overalls would come over her shoulders, where they meet her armpits, and then where the cuffs of her jeans are. And again, this is just to, give it a more realistic look. You don't have to do this. Coloring them, just blue like jeans, just blue jeans is totally fine. I'm blending out all of those colors, working back out to my lightest, and I'm leaving the center, the lightest, covering everything over. Like I said, I chose to color them all the same, so I'm not going to show you the rest of them, but they are identical outside of the little girl who had the dress. Hers, there is no gathering at the bottom. There wouldn't be in a jean dress. So, by the way, at some point I realized I forgot her legs and went back and colored those. Here, I did their shoes just a really simple black. The only reason I even needed 3 colors was because of the girl in the dress. You can see more of her shoes. In the jeans, their shoes are basically covered except for just like the little teeny tiny tips, and 1 color totally would have been sufficient. For their shirts, all right, I'm going to date myself. Okay, so back when I was in high school and I wore overalls, sweet Lord help us, I wore them. Um, I wore them with a white t-shirt. Like that's just how I rocked my overalls with a white t-shirt and actually like the old like Carhartt like workers boots and flannels. That was like really in style. But anyway, I totally just dated myself. Um, but anyway, so that's what I wore. So that's what I wanted. I wanted them to have really simple white t-shirts, and that was just really minimal shading, because when you're coloring something white, you want to leave a lot of white. You're just adding in the shadows with your grays. Here I picked a couple of colors that matched the background to color in the little details on the front. And then I'm going to use like a more gold to color in their little buckles, the little buttons that are holding their overalls together. I'm going to add in some ground because right now they just kind of look like they're floating in a rainbow. So I just used the same C's that I already had out. I used a C5 and a C3. And again, you know, just really simple blending, not really doing too much of anything. Normally I would blend out to a C1, but on here you're not even going to be able to see it because the background is so vibrant, so it's like completely pointless. I'm going to add in some highlights on their buttons. Buttons, buckles, whatever we're calling them. The girl in the dress looks more like buckles, but the other two look more like buttons. Whatevs. And then I thought it would be super cute to add in some stitching detail on their overalls. Because like when you do simpler images, not images, the images aren't simple, simpler card designs, like I do, it's really the punches in the details, guys. That's just something that's going to set it apart. So I added some white stitching on their the bottoms of their pants, the bottom of her dress, and then around the pocket. I'm going to go ahead and outline my image just using an EK Success writing tool because I prefer bolder lines, especially on watercolor paper. It can sometimes be difficult to get a good image. If you're using the Misty, it's not, but I didn't use the Misty when I stamped, so I actually started to stamp the sentiment just by itself, and I was like, and this is a one-layer card. You are sure to mess up if you do not use the Misty. So I'm using W+9 pure black ink to stamp my sentiment. Super crisp. I love that ink. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut it out with the Sunshine Layers die. So I lined it all up, and then I taped it down. And I was going to, I was having a little bit of trouble with my tape. It did not want to work with me. This is just washi tape I have laying around on my desk. I ran it through my Big Shot, and then I'm going to go ahead and very carefully remove my tape because I don't want to rip my paper. And then I have this adorable little panel with these little scallop edges that I love so much. So one of my favorite ways to use this particular die is a white on white. So I'm using a white card base. I cut some white fun foam that's just a little bit smaller than my die cut panel. And then I'm going to go ahead and pop the card up on that. So it is white on white, but it has a little bit of dimension. And then last but not least, because no card should be made without the shimmers, I used Clear Wink of Stella on the background and just kind of swished it around. It didn't reactivate the Distress ink. I didn't have any issues, but I will warn you, I have used the Spectrum Noir ones in the past, and that does reactivate them. So if you have that, just be careful. So that's basically the card. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.